Welcome back to the narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Faria. The pageant culture in Grenada has a long and colored history, and one man is documenting a segment of that history. Richcado Douglas, a playwright and creative extraordinaire, has authored a book. It's a coffee table pictures, images book, A Lost History of a Time, Grenada Carnival Queens 1945 1974. And the book is highlighting and featuring carnival queens of that period. Now, Carnival Queen Show is a big deal in Grenada, and it has come quite a long way from the days when only colored girls can get on the stage to the point where Florin Hope broke the barriers, and a dark-skinned girl from rural Grenada was able to be crowned queen, to present day when the poor and the working class of Grenada's dark-skinned daughters can actually be crowned queen on multiple occasions on the Queen Show stage. Welcome to the program, Richcado Douglas. Let's talk about Lost History of a Time and your book. Welcome.
Hello, Callistra. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody, Grenada and worldwide, because I know you go worldwide now, Callistra, so that's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, so you're capturing, it doesn't, your book does not feature all of the carnival queens that have been crowned in Grenada from the beginning of the carnival queen pageant back in the days of, I believe it was the JCs, but it captures 1945 to 1974. Why that particular period?
Well, that particular period to me, that's before we got the independence period, and that was the colonial years. And the colonial years in those days was totally different from what it is today. I decided to do it from the first carnival we ever had, which is 1945. That was the first pageant, Carnival Queen pageant, and right up to 74. And I stopped at 74 again because of the independence. But I felt it was a part of history that I do not want the Grenadians not to remember, because the young generation today, they think history started when they were born, you know, and that period is really an incredible part of our carnival history, the way it was done in those days. The first carnival queen was in 1945, and in those days there was no competition. The first carnival queen was chosen to be the queen, and she was Iris Thompson. You know Rennick Thompson in Grenada. Well, the mother in 1945, and they were chosen as a husband and wife, and so it was Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. So that's what it was like in those days. There was no per se from 1945 to 1950. There was no competition.
When you say no competition, then how was the queen? So it was a Mr. and Mrs. Grenada, for want of a better phrasing. But how were they selected?
Well, the first ones, like 1945, she was chosen. They came up to her and said, "We would like you to be the king and queen of Carnival." Yeah, right? And then the second one, 1946 to 47, 48, they were chosen. 4 girls would get on the stage, and they'll have people in the audience, and they'll be chosen by ballot. So you'll vote on who you like, right? And like when the 1946 was Eleanor Lashley, right? And she told me that she was like 17, 18 years old, and there were 4 of them on the stage, and the audience were there, and they just chose maybe about 20, 30 people, and they voted by ballot, right? And they put it in, and whoever got the most won, right? And then her example was that one of the men in the audience says, "I voted for you, I voted for you, I want to be your king." So she said, "Okay, you'll be my king." And that's how the king came about as well. But in those days, they always chose a king to accompany the queen. So sometimes if a queen was chosen, she would take her boyfriend or her best friend or something to be the king. And even the, what's her name, our governor, not Governor General, the Paul Schoon's wife. No,
Okay.
Paul Schoon's wife in 1947. Esme Lumsden.
Lady Schoon, yes.
Lady Schoon, she was the carnival queen. Again, she was chosen, right? And she chose Mr. Rennick to be her king. And it's quite amazing because in those days, if you know where Port Louis is now, it used to be ballast ground, right? And in those days, there used to be a barge that left ballast ground with the carnival queen and her entourage, right? And they would sail across the harbor. And as they're sailing across the harbor, a cannon would go off on the fort, right? And they sail across the harbor and dock by where where the financial complex is now, where the old post office harbor is, around that area. And they'll get off, get into cars, and drive down to the market, to Carnival. So that's how it was in those days. It's quite amazing. And the reason why this book took me 6 years, because it's over 200 pictures, 200 photos. You know, it's a beautiful book of 200 photos. And I got every carnival queen from 1945 to 1973, right? Except 1946. Like nobody could trace where she is or whatever it is. So we couldn't find that. But for 1945 to 1973, I have every.
But do you have a name? Do you have a name of the
I have every name. It took me 6 years. Every name. I'll show you the first queen, the first king and queen. This way. That was the first king and queen, right? You see, they were chosen. And then, to tell you how British it was very, very colonial. This is in 1947. You see how queenly, they're very much like the old Camelot and the queens of the Elizabethan era. That's how colonial it was, right? And to enter these competitions, you have to be of character. You have to be of a certain family, a society, you know. And it was a big thing in those days to be a carnival queen. Young people used to look.
Black girls could never get on the stage then. Black girls could
Black girls never, dark skinned girls never got into those competitions, right? Even if they got in, they never won, right? Until 1963, when Florine Hope won. From, you know where Paris she is from. You
Yes,
always remind me.
Yes, of course.
Tell them.
It was Victoria Pride.
Yeah, she's from Victoria, yeah. But it was not a sense of racism. In those days, it was more class, you know, because most of the girls who went up for Carnival Queens, they were all friends, you know, but it was more of a class thing. And sometimes sponsors used to choose their girls. There was no, you know, committee in those days to say we're going to choose like, you know, 4 or 5 girls. But if a sponsor would walk up to you on the street and they would ask you to be their queen, you can bring a girl to a sponsor. And if the sponsor doesn't approve, they're not going to sponsor. So it had to do a lot to deal with the eliteness of the society in those days.
But it tells of a time in our country when the majority now, because Grenada is a black majority country, where
Right.
where we were not the issue of class, and even you say it was not based on race, but race to a certain extent, ruled the day. And so how valuable, when we look back on that, it reminds us of a time that we've spent quite a lot of time, you know, attacking and crying down the colonial period, the colonials, you know, that although it was a classier time, we have to admit, you know, at the risk of getting our necks, you know, it was a classier time.
It was classy. It was totally different, yeah.
You know, totally different than what's happening now. But because of the oppression of a certain class of people and a certain race of people, it's not, you know, the most well looked upon period in our history.
But it wasn't negative. When I say negative, in the sense of the period itself was, as I said, very colonial, but it was a classiness that there was a pride in how you looked, in how you dressed, in manners, in respect, in respecting society, the elders, etc., like you know, those sorts of things. For instance, just being after the Carnival Queen show, it was there would be a ball, you know, with an orchestra, and the girls would leave in their evening gowns and they'd go up to the ball. And when you got to the Richmond Hill, when you got there were chairs and thrones set up. And the girls would go and sit on these thrones, and all the men would want to dance with the girls because it was a big thing in those days to be a carnival queen, right? Young girls used to say, I want to be a carnival queen. And the girls used to be celebrities. The women used to be celebrities in those days. They used to be invited to all the cocktail parties and stuff. And there was a certain level of dignity that they carried with them. So when you saw a girl after carnival, a woman after the carnival, she was respected. You know, they would say, "Oh, she went up a carnival queen." You know, she went up a carnival queen. So it was just not something that happened on the night, and the next day they forget about it and they're gone about it. You know, so the women in those days were looked up to. And for instance, when Jenelyn Morissette went up in early 60s, her costume, she was a teacher in the convent, and she had to take her costume to the nuns so the nuns could approve the costume. That's to tell you.
Wow. Oh,
Yes,
okay.
what it was like, yeah, in those days. And the Queen Show was the biggest show at Carnival. It brought in the most money, right? It was an elite, it was a top-notch event. People used to come in evening gowns to go to the Queen Show. The men used to be dressed in jacket and ties. And of course, there'll be the bleachers where the rowdy crowd would be. We want so and so. We want who, right? So it was really the biggest event, and they brought in the most money, bigger than Carnival, bigger than Calypso. When a queen was getting a car, the Calypso monarch was getting $200. You know, remember $200 in the 60s was a lot of money still, right? But in some prizes for the queens were like an iron, you know, a gold chain. Like in 1945, the gift was 1947. Her first prize was a gold chain, you know, and an iron to iron clothes, you know. So it's
That's
really,
great.
really a different kind of world. And in 1963, when fluorine went up, I mean, fluorine was just absolutely beautiful. I knew it. I mean, for instance, for example, let me tell you this. My father ran Carnival for 7 years, 8 years. That's why I'm so into the Queen Show and everything, because I lived it with my dad. So when my dad would go down to the park, you know, on Queen Show nights and for rehearsals and stuff, I was there as a little boy, 10, 11, 12. I knew all of what was happening around me. So I was really engrossed in it, you know, at a 10-year-old. That's why I felt that period is so important, because Carnival in those days was totally different, you know. So when fluorine went up, I mean, there were other dark-skinned girls who went up. I'm saying dark-skinned because in those days that's what they used to be called, right? They were not black. They weren't saying black or stuff like that. They were dark-skinned girls, you know. When fluorine went up, I remember Sir Royston Hopkins. You know, we chatted just about maybe a few months before he died, and he was telling me the story because he was dating Fluorine at the time, and he said he went to the park and just dressed in his little pretty shirt and stuff. And he said when she came onto the stage, and the audience just went crazy because she was so incredible on that stage. He said he ran home and changed his clothes because he just had a feeling she was going
That
to
she
win.
would win.
And if she won, he had to accompany her because he was the boyfriend, right? To the ball, you know. So let me show you just a picture of Fluorine, you know. So,
Okay, yeah. Let me see if it's among the collection that I have of her.
that's
Is that?
one. That's her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
know my mother recalls the
yeah.
Florine Hope victory vividly, and even today I actually did a video of her recounting when Florine came home to Victoria, and the car that she
Okay.
was in, she was in a
Right.
convertible, and
Right.
with the top off, and she described the dress down to I think maybe the last button on the dress, and she talked about the crowds being at the bridge, the entry bridge into
Yeah, that's
Victoria,
her.
and they were there and to welcome her into Victoria because it was a really big deal to have
Yeah, that's them on the
someone.
truck.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah,
any of
that's
her
right.
in? Do you have
Victoria.
any of her in the
Hmm?
convertible? Do you have any of her in the convertible?
No, that she was not in those. She was in a truck with the other girls in it. It was a
Okay.
convertible truck.
Mm.
Yeah. So so I have all these pictures. They're like I have over 200 pictures of all the girls who went up. You know, it's really quite an incredible book. You know, to have as a coffee table. And the thing about it, and when after 1970, when Black Power was in, right? That's when Meryl Otley, she was a 17-year-old girl, and she went to the Carnival Queen, and it was the first time somebody went on stage with her natural hair, natural afro, and it was all about Africa, because in the 1970s was the Black Power days, right? So So Meryl came on and she just blew everybody away. So, and that was the first really girl who went on stage with her natural afro and stuff, and she won, right? So I have all of these pictures. I have over 200 pictures. I have of Meryl, and I even have of Jennifer Hostin when she won. She was the first Black Miss World in 1970. To win the competition. So it's really historically.
Did Jennifer Hostin also win the national crown?
No, she came second. She came second as a queen. Yeah, she went and that's her. That's her in the national in Grenada. In the national, she came second. Frances McIntyre came first. Yeah, Frances came first in that, and that's Frances there. So it's a wealth of beautiful pictures of all the girls. And when I started off, I started off with just wanting the queens, the ones who won. But then I said I wanted to honor all the women who went up. Just not the ones who came first. So that's why it took me 6 years, because most people lost a lot of pictures in Janet and a lot of pictures in Ivan. So it was really, really hard to find pictures. So people from all over the world, I put it out, and people went into their basement and their old boxes and pulled out pictures and sent it for me, So it's really wonderful
collection. And it's a lot of women to cover. Multiple women over so many years, 1945 to 1974. It's a really
exactly. So some years I only have like 2 pictures, or some years I got like 8 pictures of one year. So it's kind of, would be like that. But I must admit, I got every carnival queen from 1945 except 1946, right up to 1973.
So I was asking you about 1946, but do you have the name of the 1946 winner?
1946, yes, I have the name. And let me just have it offhand here. Erica Roberts. And I tried to track her down. And I went and they told me she was married and somebody from Montmorris. I went all through Montmorris, and her king was a Roy Griffith. Roy Griffith. People knew Roy Griffith. Some men in Grenada knew Roy Griffith. And he said he was a very handsome black man, brown skin, they said, he was there. But remember too, in those days, even if you were black, dark skin, and you had money, you were with the elite. Still. So money played a big part. And then you can be very light skinned, right? And you have no money, but you won't be invited to certain things because of your lack of money, etc., etc. And in those days, it was not
your social class, because of
your social status,
your economic
and it wasn't about parishes in those days. It was a Grenada thing. So they'll go up, they'll just go and ask you. So there was not, St. Patrick's, St. Patrick's and David, etc. That was just a Grenada carnival queen. So sometimes most of the girls would come from St. George's, But it's really, really a fascinating period. And I think it's very, very important for us to know it. The young people today, go back. I was sure Rasta was going through my book and just couldn't believe it. He said, wait, what? This is Grenada? And I said, yeah, this is Grenada. It's really amazing,
We used to look like that, so way back when the country used to look like
yes.
that. But your book, your book is available on Amazon. It's also available here locally in Grenada for purchase. Is it?
Right, and I will be launching it in October. But it's on Amazon right now. I know it's amazing. It was really, really hard, to get sponsorship or something like this. Because I kept saying, this is such a historical part of Carnival, that I really, really, and I sought and I fought for people. I looked for people to kind of give me a little sponsor, but nobody was really biting. And that's why I really, do you mind if I just mention some sponsors? Is that okay? No? Okay, I know I'm not supposed to do it, but I just want to say thank you.
I think your sponsors know that you appreciate them.
Okay, great, right? Because Clarissa, you know what it is like. We know looking for stuff like that, and when it's a part of, because I listen to the carnival people today, and they just talk about a certain period, and they forget what went before the colonial days, before independence, what Grenada fought for, what Grenada fought to come out of from 1945 to 1970, 72, 73. And it was very important.
No, before I let you go, because we're running out of time for this segment, how does the period the period up to 1974, the period after 1974? I hear people keep talking about the JCs and so in the with Carnival Queen shows and what's happening now because it seems very different now. Um,
Yeah,
what would you say are the
because
major differences?
the JCs, and so just privately run. The government supported the group, the JCs, the JCs Club and the Lions Club. They were in the 60s, right?
Mm,
The 70s it was different. The 60s and right 50s and 60s that the JCs and the Lions Club they ran Carnival, and it was a GCC in those years, Grenada Carnival Committee. It was a committee that was supported by the government, right? But it was run privately by these clubs. So there was not all of this commotion that's happening now. So it's totally different. When I say commotion, I don't mean that in a negative sense.
mm,
But now Carnival has gone way, way above where, I mean, it has. When I look at the costumes, I just want to talk about that briefly. I mean, I'm not a prude and everybody has a right to certain things, but my thing is that Carnival is a family event. I don't care what anybody says. When you have the Kiddies Carnival, that is their day, that is their time. But what they have to understand is from the Kiddies Carnival, they go into the big carnival. And in the olden days, you used to bring the kids to the big carnival to say, this is when you grow up, this is what you're going to get into. Kiddies Carnival is a taste. But now you come there and you don't want your kid to be part of what you're seeing. And this is just me, right? I mean,
it's now an X-rated show on the road.
Exactly, exactly. There's no if you ask somebody to say to portray an apple, you get red feathers. A banana, you get yellow feathers. A lime, you get green feathers. You don't see the creativity of the apple. It's just pretty, pretty, pretty feathers. They look all stunning. You put all of them together, you mix all the bands together, and there is no difference. And that was a difference in the olden days because mass was about creativity. It was history. It was a moving art. When you looked at a band, that's Egypt, that's Africa, that's Rome, that's from space. But right and the mass camps, the community involvement that is so missing now. I mean, when I brought my bands, I brought it for like 10 years, RKD and Associates, we still had the mass camp feeling. People coming, the neighbors coming, people bringing food, you're making the costumes. And in those days, the seamstresses and tailors used to get so much work out of Carnival because the band leaders will say, Mr. Jones is doing section 5. So all those in section 5 will go and buy your material. Sometimes you have to go buy your own material, buy your
Mm.
material and take it to Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones is going to sew because he has the designs, etc., etc. So there's a lot of community involvement and work with the local entrepreneurs, etc. But today, everything comes in a pizza box, And for instance, a perfect example is his husband. He he he's at Carnival and he's not playing mass, but he's walking next to his wife. And a friend, and so why not jumping up? I'm just here to see nobody touch my wife. I said, but but I said, in the first place, why did you guys decide to leave the house dressed like that? Again, people say it's my body, it's my this, it's my that, I can do what I want, But if you're so afraid, why have her go through all of that, or she put herself through all of that for the sake of having a G-string and all your body exposed, And so these are the things that really bother me. When I say I would like to see differently the young people today, because I mean, another friend of mine said ask her son, "Do you want to play carnival?" He said, "Well, yeah. Why do you want to play carnival?" Because I want to go and wine and woman.
and and,
So
and and that is what it has come to, unfortunately. And I think people like yourself need to become the gatekeepers to guard the purity of the carnival and to bring back a lot of the masquerade of old. And also to get people interested. I'm not sure how that's going to happen. The
mm,
horse seems to have bolted, but those of us who still love the old ones can maybe probably still work hard to pull the horse back in, hopefully. But that's all the time we have, and
I know
yeah, we're gonna have to
this is
wrap
a
up
beautiful
here.
book,
Yeah, we're gonna have to wrap
and
it
I have
up
your
here. Good,
copy
good,
here. I have your
good.
copy here.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I look forward to collecting it. Thank you so much for being on and good luck with the book, History of a Lost Time, Carnival
Thank you,
Queens,
Calista. All the
Grenada.
best to you. Eh? God bless.
All right, thank you. This is the narrative. I was on there with Richcado Douglas, playwright, author, and creative extraordinaire. He has authored a book. It's a picture book of Carnival Queens from 1945 to 1974, recording a lost time when the Carnival Queen show was much different from what it is now. More when we come back. On the narrative coming up next, Claude Douglas, sociologist, talks to me about the possible social impacts after the passage of Hurricane Beryl, which wreaked havoc on the northern section of Grenada and on Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Back in a moment.